Well, thank you for the intro and thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. This was supposed to be in person, but budgetary things and different things within the org, we weren't able to make it happen in person. So I'm glad I could still be here with you virtually. We're still going to have a great time. I'm not worried about that. So tonight we're going to be talking about the concept of marketing accessibility and what does that look like at any organization. And this can be scaled from a small startup all the way to an organization with thousands of employees. So accessibility deserves a better marketing team. And spoiler alert, it's you. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. Um, as Josh said, my name is Angela Young. I am currently with Epsilon, serving as an advisor to digital solutions consulting. And then also, I have kind of my own, I don't know, I guess we'll call it a movement, but hashtag A11y with Angela, where I share, a whole bunch of tips, tricks, different things on LinkedIn, childhood trauma stories and how they led me to accessibility and everything like that. So it's a good time on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, I would be more than thrilled to have a conversation with you, and I'll give you my contact info at the end. So I am a queer, non-binary, multiply disabled accessibility strategist. My pronouns are they, them. And visually speaking, I am a Caucasian person with side shaved hair, and currently the curly side is purple and blue. It changes frequently. So, even my headshots are often out of date, as this one is. I believe that, access is a whole brand. It's not just a checkbox. And, I love leading enterprise accessibility training and culture programs that embed inclusion into product design and organizational change. But my most favorite thing is speaking and advocating and writing about how accessibility can really be a hub for electric joy and human-centered systems and the power of community. So, what is A11y with Angela? It's more a movement. We're rooted in radical inclusion, real world impact. It's where accessibility means authenticity. Excuse the typo, I will fix that right now. But even more importantly, humanity. So, what I try to do through the storytelling that I do, through the brand building that I do, is having those unfiltered conversations to give you the practical tools that you need. And basically, all I hope is that everyone that I come in contact with, can find a way to get really impassioned and empowered about accessibility, and then be a change agent. So just a quick note, all of the opinions in this presentation are my own, not the opinions of my employer. And I would like to acknowledge that Portland occupies the ancestral homelands of many different indigenous groups. We have the Multnomah, the Wasco, the Clackamas, the Cathlamet, and there are a whole bunch of other bands. Their lands were taken through forced dispossession and removal via treaties, and there are indigenous people of these groups who continue to live, work, and create on those lands today. So for tonight, we're going to be talking through what is the challenge when it comes to marketing for accessibility? And then what is a marketer's mindset? What does that look like? What does that mean about thinking about this differently? And then how do you enact the power of persuasion or leverage the power of persuasion to build a rapport with your executives to create that executive presence? From there, how can you build an accessibility brand? What are some key marketing strategies? How do you make accessibility unavoidable at your organization? And then what are some key takeaways? And then we'll finish with a Q&A and a discussion. So what is the challenge? Number one, you're probably constantly making the case for accessibility at your organization, but maybe it's not gaining traction. So leadership might see accessibility as a compliance issue and not a value driver. And what I tell everyone is compliance is fear-based. Oh no, we don't want to get sued. We don't spend a lot of money, right? But what we want to do is position accessibility as a value driver. So resistance comes from a lack of awareness or perceived cost or shifting priorities. And if this sounds familiar to you, then don't worry, we're going to change the approach and give you some tools and ammo to move forward in a different way. So let's talk first about some disability and accessibility myths. I'm sure you've all heard at least one of these or more or all. Oh, we don't serve people with disabilities. Um, our product, isn't that just for people with X disability, or isn't that accommodation just for people with X disability? We don't need to add more tech debt. Hey, we can automate it. We don't need humans behind this practice. Oh, accessibility, we already did that a few years ago. Accessibility is way too expensive. It isn't a priority. We have bigger issues like security. We really shouldn't have to change our whole design for just a small group of people. So the goal for accessibility then as a market strategy means that we need to be able to innovate and get those products to market quickly. So you're probably sitting here thinking, okay, well then there's even more of a need to make the business case for accessibility, right? Well, there's several different cases that you might think you have to make. There's the business case. Accessibility opens your organization to new markets. People with disabilities currently represent a $490 billion market. The financial case would be that finding issues that reach production is very costly, but so are lawsuits. The legal case would be that accessibility is required by law in many countries around the world. Businesses that don't comply can face legal action, fines, or regulatory action. The human case is that disability is part of the human experience. We all know and care about someone who has a disability. Our customers and colleagues have disabilities, and one day it's likely that you too, guess what, will have a disability if you don't have one already. For example, most people will have an invisible disability. One of my invisible disabilities is that I'm deaf, and you probably wouldn't know that unless I told you, and that's 100% by design. The ethical case also is that access to information and ICT is a fundamental human right. So now it's time to think about how we're going to shift this mindset. First, you want to understand your audience. You want to know why someone might say no. So instead of making the case and then possibly getting a no, we're going to start creating an accessibility movement. To do this, you need to think like a marketer, not a compliance officer, and then you need to brand accessibility as essential, exciting, and inevitable. What do marketers do differently? When marketers persuade instead of inform, they're relying on emotional appeal, stories over statistics. Stories will win every single time over data. Consistency, repetition builds recognition. Strategic messaging, different messages for different audiences. You want to think about your intended audience prior to delivering your message. You also want to think about what accessibility literally looks like at your organization. It should have an identity. There should be visual branding for accessibility. And then you want to end with a call to action. You always want to make it easy for people to say yes. So what is the difference between persuasion versus information? Information informs and persuasion inspires action. People don't just need to know what's going on or why they need it, they need to actually care about that. Accessibility needs an emotional and strategic approach to persuasion. We often think that if we just provide enough data, people will get on board, but guess what? Data itself and metrics themselves don't change behavior. So we need to create urgency, emotion, and relevance to persuade effectively. So what is the bottom line here? People need to feel the personal impact of accessibility. There is a persuasion formula. I suck at math, so I promise I will not have you doing any math here tonight. But it is establishing urgency, adding to that a dose of relevance, ensuring that it's simple, and then getting people to take action. So by establishing those three components, that's going to be your action driver behind accessibility. So you want to make the problem immediate and personal. You want to keep your messaging clear, direct, and actionable. And then accessibility is urgent, not something that can wait. It's something we have to do. Hey, did you realize that the EAA went into effect in June? Why do we care about the European Accessibility Act? We're a US company. Well, I'm glad you asked that. Since your website is accessed globally, you need to adhere to these standards, and here's why. Hey, did you see that organization that already got sued $30 million for not being accessible? So these are ways that you can increase urgency for accessibility as a market strategy. People then need to see themselves in the solution, so make sure that it's relevant to their role. Hey, talk to your people in legal. Did you see this? We don't want this to happen to us. We know that with your expertise, we can avoid this together. So if accessibility feels complicated, people aren't going to engage. We need to make it feel simple and achievable. Presence is important. The whole slide literally says presence is important with a heart, of course. Lots of hearts in this presentation because I love accessibility. What is executive presence? Executive presence matters for accessibility advocates because leaders prioritize strategy, risk, and innovation. Accessibility must be framed as a business driver. A confident strategic presence makes leadership take notice. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to pause right here and let you know, most of the things that I'm presenting to you tonight, I learned from my former manager, Juanita Flesas at Navy Federal Credit Union, was serving them as a client. And she taught me most of what you're seeing here, most of what I've been able to take and mobilize. So definitely need to give her a shout out. I remember her teaching me this. Leaders do not respond to compliance lectures, they respond to strategic vision. So if you're standing up there trying to explain to them why it's important, they're not going to care. But if you tie it into the organizational vision, you will get people on board. So if you want leadership buy-in, you need to speak their language. So let's walk through what that process would look like. Number one, get to know your leaders. Oh, I know my leaders. We talk every day. Okay, not like this, you might not. You want to learn about the people who make decisions in your organization by number one, understanding the leadership chain. Then you want to get to know your support staff. I have lunch regularly with one of my executive assistants. She's not mine, but at the organization that I serve, I have lunch with her. We are actually pretty decent friends. I got invited to go pet her goats in West Virginia, which I have not done yet, but the invitation stands. So you want to make friends with people like that, right? Because they are going to be your advocates. Also try to learn about them as people and then take notes about the type of language they're using or what really drives them, when you're all having conversations. For example, the client that I serve, I have a leader on one of our QA teams. He does not like emotion and he wants you to come at him with solutions. So when we talk, there is zero emotion, and I always come with a whole bunch of solutions and things that we can talk through, and then he chooses one that he really likes, and then we move forward with it. I have another leader, always wants to talk about our kids first. That's what we do first. 10 minutes, let's talk about your kids, what's going on with Sophie's basketball, what's going on with Morgan's soccer, and then, we move into the meeting. But that's just how we do it. So you have to kind of establish those patterns with your leaders. Sources to learn about your leaders: LinkedIn, Google, and Zoom Info. If you're not Googling your own name, you really should do it. You might learn a thing or two about yourself, but more importantly, Google your leaders. You're going to see if they've ever published articles or if they've ever spoken at conferences. You can learn more about what makes them tick that way. Develop rapport. I was just kind of talking about this, but reach out to your leaders, make yourself known. Start with people at your manager's level and then work your way up, and try to target departments or areas that are related to accessibility. So the leaders you might want to begin with are legal and compliance, unfortunately. But yes, you need to start there, definitely. Because your organization already understands that accessibility is a legal issue. Then you want to get to know human resources, cybersecurity, product development, marketing and UX, technology governance, and procurement. These are all really solid departments. If you're like, I'm a startup and we only have two of those, great. Start with the two that you do have, because eventually as you expand your team, you can get to know the others. Now it's time to build your reputation. So you've gotten to know your leadership, you know what makes them tick. Now, do they know you is the question. So one of the most important things you can do is become the go-to authority on accessibility at your organization. Being an authority will help you establish your credibility and to grow your network. You're also going to want to deepen your relationship with your colleagues and establish good working relationships. The last thing you want is when people see you coming down the hall, they spin around and go the other way, right? That means you've created a name for yourself, but not in the way that you wanted. So when people know what you bring to the table, they feel like they can count on you and they will trust what you have to say. It's important to know that developing your reputation is something you need to work at every single day. Learn your business. Your leaders will be thinking about the impact of your work on your business. So understand your business and how it makes profit. This is key to making a strong case about how accessibility delivers value. It'll also help you understand the priorities your leaders are focused on. Often, you'll need to make a strong case for why accessibility is more urgent than their other priorities. So when you come at your leadership and they're like, oh, we're worried about this and we're worried about this and we're worried about this, you can be like, that's great. Have you thought about how A and accessibility tie in or how B and accessibility will tie in? So tie it into what they're already worried about. Come with solutions. This is my biggest pet peeve as a manager. Do not ever bring a problem to a leader without offering a well thought out solution. Even if you pop something into Chat GPT because you are literally hitting a brick wall and you have no idea what to do about this problem, you need to come at them with something. And I have even said to my leadership, look, I have no idea what to do. So I threw it into Chat GPT, and my Chat GPT's name is Scully. Scully told me this is what I should do. And what do you think about this? Okay. If you got the Scully reference, I love you. We can be best friends. If you don't feel comfortable taking on a leadership role yourself, work with a colleague who would like to take that on. We are not all natural leaders, nor do some of us want to be natural leaders, and that is 100,000% okay. Okay. Think about, Broadway shows. They always have people behind the scenes. If the stagehands weren't doing their jobs, then you wouldn't have a play, right? So it's not all about the people on the stage, it's about everybody. If you don't know how to solve a particular problem, make sure you ask someone in the community. Ali Slack, for example, is a great place to do that. Local meetup groups, accessibility champions networks, conferences, and of course, reaching out on LinkedIn. There are a plethora of accessibility professionals out there that would be more than willing to support you if you're trying to doodle on a problem. Okay, so now you've gotten to know your leader, you've established rapport, you've come at them with some solutions for their problems. Now it's time to create an accessibility brand. It is very important to note that you cannot do this until you have done this stuff before this, okay? You can't just come in and be like, here's what we're doing for accessibility. They're going to be like, who the hell, like, who are you? You're sitting in front of me. I don't even know who you are. What do you mean you're coming at me with a whole bunch of changes? I don't even know what you're talking about. So you have to do all the other stuff before you can come at them with some branding changes. So there are three main steps to successful branding: defining your brand identity, identifying key values, and establishing your brand voice and tone. So for brand identity, the core message would be, what is the central idea that defines accessibility in your organization? And this can be a very simple, well, of course, it's a statement such as accessibility drives innovation for everyone. Next, you're going to identify key values. What principles will your brand emphasize? So examples could be, our brand emphasizes inclusion or usability or fairness or compliance or innovation. Then you want to establish a brand voice and tone. Should your message be inspiring, authoritative, practical, or all three? For example, Google's accessibility brand leans on innovation and inclusion. This is my favorite part about branding is the power of storytelling. I have done 3 to 4 hour workshops on this one slide. Okay, so I'm trying to keep it really short here. So people remember stories, not statistics. Um, Empathy builds engagement and buy-in. If you highlight real users and real experiences, that's where you're going to hook people into supporting you. Show how accessibility changes lives by demonstrating the results before and after the accessibility efforts. Personalize accessibility within your organization, make it relatable. One of the ways to do this is with member personas. So maybe your organization has, oh, this is a member who does this, or this is a client who does this, or this is a customer who does this, so you tell a story. And then, of course, ideally, tie those stories that you're telling to business impact, okay? One of the stories I love telling is the story of captions. So as I told you, I'm deaf. I rely on captions. I have seen my fair share of horrendous captions. I have seen my fair share of great captions. I have entire networks and apps that I won't use based on how bad their captions are. And what I like to joke, with people is, have you ever seen like the 3-inch high captions? Okay, I'm deaf, I'm not blind, right? I can read. Like I don't need it 3 inches high blocking my screen. I just want to be able to kind of understand what's being said. So, one time I was having a conversation with a client who was doing TikToks to brand her marketing, and her captions would pop up, right in the middle of the screen covering her face. And she's like, well, nobody wants to look at me. They just want to read what I have to say. I'm like, no, like I want to see you just like everybody else who doesn't need the captions can see you, right? So, when you tie a story to business impact and you tell stories, that really can drive change through the power of storytelling. Uh-oh, what's going on here? Sorry. My slide's not advancing. 1 second. Sorry about that. Then you want to build momentum with marketing tactics. So this could be through internal campaigns, engagement events, ambassador programs, incentives and gamification. This is my favorite part. Make sure you're celebrating those small wins with your team. And then have executive buy-in. And the way to do this, the number one way to do this is utilize that language that's aligning with business goals. And how do you know what the business goals are? I'm so glad you asked that question. You know what the business goals are because you've already established rapport with your leaders and you've already gotten to know exactly what drives them and the language that they speak individually. So therefore, marketing works through repetition. Okay. And when it comes to internal campaigns, there's nothing like getting people excited. So if you find those champions, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and you get them excited, they're going to go tell people and get them excited. And they're going to go tell people and get them excited. You may not think this works. I can tell you 100%. I have seen this work multiple different times. It really does work. So you want to make accessibility unavoidable at your organization. You're not asking people to do something to make it more accessible. You're just expecting that they would, because of course we want to make everything accessible for everybody. So you want to weave accessibility messaging into your already existing workflows. Use positive reinforcement. Please do not go at people with a baseball bat. It's not going to get the outcome that you want. I promise you, I've seen people do it and it doesn't work. Make accessibility resources easy to find and use at your organization. You don't want people searching around frustrated because they can't find an accessibility asset that they're looking for. When I say that accessibility shouldn't be an ask, it should be an expected, this is your greatest argument. Well, who's our intended audience? And your leader is going to be like, well, our intended audience is everybody who purchases XYZ or everybody who lives in XYZ. And you're going to be like, oh, really? It's everybody, right? Oh, okay. So since it's everybody, if you're not making an accessible product, you're therefore narrowing your audience and you're cutting out easily 27% of your audience, the people with a disability. So you only want to market this to 73% of people. Are you sure about that? So there you go. Right away, they're like, oh gosh, no, of course not, right? So now it's expected that we're going to make our products accessible. Take your case to leaders. You can present to leaders individually or in small groups. You can have higher level leaders supporting you as you make the case to the highest level leader in your company. Then you can make your case more succinct the higher up you go. You can also tailor your case to their interests and values. For example, walked into the office of my former CTO one time, and on his wall, he had a picture of his family in Greece. It's like, oh, you went to Greece. Oh, how'd you know that was Greece? Oh, I've been to Greece several times. My family's Greek. Oh, where did you go? I went to Patras. Oh, I've been. So then all of a sudden, you've taken something personal, you've established a relationship with them, and then you're like, hey, now that we're talking about, family, I'd like to talk to you about this other thing that has to do with, how we can support member families or consumer families by XYZ. So find a way to tie your case in. But then, of course, the higher up you go, you want it to be succinct. You don't want to, sit there and go on and on and on to the point where people are glazing over and tuning you out. So when you can get the highest level leaders supporting you and then they can make the case to their leadership, that's where you're going to get some major wins. And if you'd like, just bring it up in an informal one-on-one if it's possible. Hey, can I grab coffee with you and talk and grab 5 minutes of your time? Tell me your order. I'll bring you coffee from the cafeteria and we can sit and talk for a minute. So it doesn't have to be this big formal presentation. It can be super casual. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 15 minutes. But the key is that you bring it up. You just want to kind of get it into their ear and get them thinking about it. This part is harder at changing a culture. So At your organization, whether you've been there since the beginning as a founder or whether you came in, somewhere around the top floor, your organization already has a culture. So the best way to change a culture is by developing a communication strategy. You want to inventory communication channels, develop a strategy, find points of contact across the business. So I can tell you right now that at the organization, the client I serve, I've got 7 people right off the bat from 7 different departments that if I really need to get something out to them, I can ping those 7 people and they will just run with it and take care of it for me. And that's because I've already established the rapport. They think accessibility is just as important as I do. That comes to recruiting volunteers and champions, utilizing your resources. Recruit others to help you make your case and learn from the community. If you are cited and you're seeing how bad these bullet points are on this slide, I don't know what happened, but I will fix it for you prior to sending the slides to Josh because my eyes are, yeah, I don't know what happened here. When I opened this presentation earlier, for whatever reason, all the bullet points were everywhere, and I had to very hastily fix everything, and I guess I missed this one, so I apologize for that. Continuing with developing a communication strategy, you can create a content calendar with diverse pieces of content. This is one of my most favorite things to do for the people that I serve on LinkedIn who are looking for a way to get into LinkedIn. I say, what are you going to talk about? Well, I don't know. I can't talk about anything. Yes, you can. What do you do for work? Okay, great. Talk about this. What do you like to do with your family on the weekend? Great. Tie that into this. So create a content calendar. Quickest way to create a content calendar, 5 by 5, 5 different subjects across 5 weekdays, right? So each week has its own series. So, for example, week 1, you're talking about UX. Week 2, you're talking about risk. Week 3, you're talking about compliance, and how accessibility ties into all those. And then you've got your 5 pieces of content for each weekday, or you can like skip a couple days, have 3 pieces of content, but now you've got yourself a matrixed content calendar to get you started for the first 30 days of your LinkedIn presence. You can also create a regular column in corporate newsletters. We do this with one of our newsletters. We have an accessibility column. You can help with community events for your company. You can contribute to chat discussions. Try to present about accessibility at your company conferences. I am aware of most of the conferences at my organization because I bug people. Oh, marketing, do you guys do like an internal conference once a year or twice a year? Or, oh, risk, what do you guys do? Like, do you have like a huddle or what do you do to, keep everybody connected and to chat about things? Bug people, ask questions, but do it nicely. And if you can, like, thank them and send them like, if you have internal e-cards or celebrate you or anything like that, find a way to thank them for their time. And then, of course, try to automate your comms if it's possible. I have not mastered this yet. So if your question is, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought this up. How do I do it? Hey, if you figure it out, let me know because I'm still trying to figure this one out because there are so many comms out there. And sometimes, they all have different threads throughout the year that pertain to certain things. So it's not always easy to automate your comms. What are some key elements of a good strategy? Hey, if you've got presence through articles, newsletters, or features, live or webinar events, if you're co-sponsoring other initiatives, like, hey, the accessibility team is co-sponsoring blah, 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 blah. If you've got chat discussions going, we have an accessibility teams chat where we just very casually, if anybody comes up with anything accessibility related, they throw it in there. It doesn't need to look a certain way. It doesn't need to be pretty. It can just be a quick ping. Hey, I heard about this and saw this, A big thing was the Super Bowl commercials last year. There were a lot of really good disability adjacent / disability related Super Bowl commercials. So we talked about that in teams, and that provided like 2 or 3 weeks of good conversations. And then finally, of course, training, which is the piece that I handle at my organization. Find points of contact across your business. Search your company directory and develop a spreadsheet of key communications points of contact. Update that list over time. It's never fun to email somebody, have the email bounce back to you, and then realize that they're no longer at your organization, and then you have no idea who to go to from there. Ask others around your organization who manages key internal communications channels. Again, if you said to me, I need you to get this out across the organization as fast as possible, I could ping 4 people by memory right off the bat that I know could send something out really quickly because they've supported me before. So, and of course, you want to make this, I didn't put this point in here, but you want to make this a symbiotic relationship, right? You don't want to be a parasite. You don't want to keep taking from them. You want to offer them something too. So if there's something you can take off their plate or support them with, always find a way to do that as well. Recruit volunteers and champions. This is going to be the biggest bang for your buck. Have a roadmap to do this, though. Have a good way of managing tasks. Oh no, another page where the bullets are all messed up. I apologize. Create an incentive program. Think about how volunteering can help the career of those who volunteer. For example, I talk to interns, our summer interns, all the time. And I'll say, what are you interested in? Oh, I really love writing. I really love copy editing. I really want to, okay, great. Do you want to help me author this newsletter? Oh my gosh, yes, I would love to author the newsletter for you. And they get really excited. So you want to support them just as much as they're supporting you. And then when they come back later and they want a letter of recommendation so that they can convert to an FTE, you're like, here's what they did that was so fantastically well. And it was, they did a great job. Ask managers if they can dedicate a resource for a few hours a week to help you. I have a team in particular. She's got 13 people on her team. Anything I need, she's like, you tell me if you need them, I'll give you a half hour off of each of their plates, no questions, across a week. It's really no big deal. And then if you want to learn more about Champions programs, again, I will fix this. This looks horrific, but there is an Accessibility Champions Network on LinkedIn. It's a group that you can join. You have to request access, and I will ensure that that is highlighted for you at the bottom and something that is clickable so that you can check that out. So I have talked a lot at you really quickly. And I apologize for how fast I talked, but I wanted to cover all of these in the time frame that I had. So to recap, number one, know the myths about disability and accessibility that you are going to need to overcome at your organization. Understand the psychology of persuasion. How can you convince someone that this is the right thing to do? Become someone leaders would be persuaded by. Remember how I told you that I act different depending on what leader I'm talking to? That's what I mean by that. Start learning about your business and your leaders, form strong working relationships, raise awareness as much as you can, and then have others make the case for you. You don't want to be the one talking all the time, right? So when people are hearing it from a lot of different people, they're going to really start to listen and to buy in. Some key takeaways: shift from making the case to building a brand, use marketing techniques, storytelling, visuals, repetition, and target messaging to different audiences. Make accessibility part of your org's culture, not just a policy. One of the other things I talk about is data and metrics. If you're coming at leadership with data and metrics, you can share your data and then you can at the end say, hey, long story short, this is telling us XYZ, boom, done. So you want to try to encapsulate what you're presenting to them in a way that is really easily understandable, especially for leadership that's senior that really doesn't have a lot of time. So my challenge to you, my call to action, remember how I said always come at people with a call to action at the end? Here's my call to action. What is one small marketing inspired action that you can take tomorrow to promote accessibility in your organization? I would really challenge you to reach out to me on LinkedIn tomorrow or Friday, maybe even Monday, give you a few days grace, but let me know something that you tried and what worked for you. I really want to hear about that because this is really, the key here. It's small steps. It's nothing major. It's small steps. I know when you look at this presentation as a whole, you're like, oh my gosh, that is so much. But if you go slide by slide and you start bullet by bullet, it really is small baby steps and it takes time. Okay, I'm not going to read these to you. These are a whole bunch of accessibility resources. I have accessibility and branding resources, marketing and branding for influence, branding and marketing by queer, BIPOC, and disabled creators, such as myself. This is why I love this slide. This is my favorite slide. Personal branding and influence from marginalized voices, writing, storytelling, and messaging for inclusive branding. Gonna give some shout outs here. Marketing by Rocio, the BYP network, and The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. First of all, if you've never read that book, you need to get the audiobook. Don't listen to it while you're driving because you'll be screaming and slamming on your brakes while you're agreeing with her. But she is just such a force in the way she reads that book, but she has branded that one phrase, your body is not an apology, as her entire message, her entire existence. So definitely check that out. She's really great at that. And then, of course, community group resources. I put Ally Slack up here by itself for a reason. If you're not on Ally Slack, please, please, please get on Ally Slack. There's also the Gaming Accessibility Discord. If you're into gaming accessibility, there's the Accessibility Club Slack, XR Access Slack. There are local meetup groups such as this one. There's the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, IAAP. There's also OZY Slack if you are based in Oceania. So there are a lot of really great resources for you to check out. If you're not familiar with them, please dig into this. They're all really exciting. And then I am a resource. So, thank you for your time tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you can have. If you want to sit down and start building a marketing strategy for accessibility at your organization, if you want to start talking about what it would look like to brand yourself and get started on LinkedIn, happy to share anything I've learned with you. You can reach out to me at A11y with Angela at gmail.com, or you can reach out to me at LinkedIn. I will be sending all of these slides to Josh, and then moreover, I have an accessibility branding checklist that I will be sending over as well, so that if you don't want to sit here and feel overwhelmed by an entire slide deck, you can have a 2-page resource that kind of distills it all down for you.